Good morning. My name is Ashley Stevenson, and I'm the owner of Story Photographers in Raleigh. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with y'all this morning, but thank you for still allowing me to share my story with you. I went to Campbell a little while ago. I was a religion major, and I loved my time at Campbell. I always knew that I wanted to be in ministry somehow, but I didn't really know what the details of that were. Didn't know the exact plan on that. So I graduated, got married straight out of undergrad, and then went to Duke Divinity School for a year. I left after 1 year because I was pretty miserable. I didn't love it. No offense, Duke people. It just wasn't for me. And at the time I felt like I was a little bit of a failure in that. I'd never quit anything before. I had always done really well at everything that I had done. And so this was a new experience for me to give up on something. It felt like I was giving up on something. I know now that it was just not a good fit for me, and it wasn't the best timing either. So I leave Duke. I end up having a couple different part-time jobs. And on the side, I had friends and family starting to ask me to photograph them. These friends and family had always seen that I love photography. I was always the person in middle school and high school who had a camera on her because I'm 33. So that means that we didn't get smartphones until after college. So that meant I had to have a camera on me at all times to be the one to photograph everything. But so these family and friends started asking me to take their pictures, and then they started telling their family and friends about the work that I did, and things just started happening. All of a sudden, I had enough referrals from these people to have a part-time job, and then it grew to where it became my full-time job. That was never the plan. I never imagined that I would have my own business and that I would get to do something creative that I loved. But it happened, and I loved it. I was so excited to have this opportunity. Around this time, so 2 years out of undergrad, 2 years into being married, I was only 24, out of nowhere, very unexpected, my dad committed suicide. And that turned everything upside down for me. I started questioning everything I thought I knew about my family, especially about my dad. As I'm trying to build this new business, as I'm a newlywed, I also felt like I needed to take on the role of leader in my family. I felt like I needed to try to take care of everybody, and it just got really overwhelming. It was very overwhelming. I took on too much. Also around this time, the church that I was a part of fell apart, divided, imploded over some stuff that was really important to me. And this was actually the second or third church in a row that this happened at, that I'd been a part of, that I had led worship at or been in leadership at. It divided over things that were really important to me. So in some of these situations, it was over women in ministry or gender equality, or welcoming and affirming people who happen to be gay. So all around this time, I'm experiencing this loss of community with people that I loved in places that I felt safe. I was experiencing this life turning upside down after my dad killed himself. And all the while still trying to keep my business afloat, keep my marriage running, keep my friendships. And I just found myself in this place where I spiritually checked out. I think it was kind of subconscious that I did it, I don't know, but I look back now and I see that I had all of these pieces, these tools that I approached God with. So I had my inherited faith from my family. I had this inherited spirituality from the church that I grew up in. I was at church every time the doors were open, and my family was there with me every time the doors were open. And then I go to Campbell, and I'm a religion major, and I get all these new tools. ways to read the Bible in a historical context and through critical lenses, learning new things about God through theology and philosophy. And then I gained even more tools like that at Duke Divinity School. So I get to this point in my life where nothing is what I thought it would be. Everything's upside down. And instead of inviting God into that, I looked at all these tools and I thought, okay, I never decided how I think God works in the world. I don't know how God interacts with prayer, how God answers prayers or not. So instead of figuring that out, I'm just going to put that to the side. I'm sure God has way too many other things to worry about, and I'm just going to kind of check out. Now looking back, it reminds me of the prodigal son story, not in the way that you would think. But let me read the story first, and then I'll tell you why. So this is Luke chapter 15, starting at verse 11. Jesus continued, "There is a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate." That's the part of the story that we think of when we think of the prodigal son, but it's this last part that I identified with. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." What's funny is that I'd heard this story all my life growing up in church, and it just never connected with me. I never related with it at all. And I got to Campbell, and I heard a couple different ministers actually preach on this text, and they too said that they didn't really connect with the prodigal son part of the story, that they connected with the older brother part of the story. And that's when a light bulb went off for me. I totally understood that. That completely resonated with me. I had spent my whole life following the rules, wanting to do everything the best that I could, to be at church every time the doors are open, to be the best at everything, to get the best grades, to be the best friend. So I totally understood that. And so I think I got to this point in my life when something really hard happened, and I was kind of like, well, I've done everything right. Like, why is this thing happening? So I go through about 7 years of this, being spiritually checked out, of being anxiously driven by trying to hold everything together all the time, trying to hold my family together, trying to be the best friend and spouse and business owner that I can be. And to the point where it was too much. I was not myself in any of it. I had put everything else before me to a point where I was lost in all of it. So this leads us to last summer of 2016. After all of the trauma that we had been through, my husband suddenly left. And now that's a story that's still a little fresh, so I'm not going to share about that. But what I do want to share is that when that happened, I hit rock bottom. Again, I started thinking, I have done everything I possibly can so that the worst thing never happens. And yet, the worst thing has happened. So where does that leave me? And so I hit rock bottom and I started reciting the Serenity Prayer. I'm actually wearing it on my necklace. If you don't know it, the Serenity Prayer goes, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I found that this prayer felt safe to me because it wasn't me asking God to behave a certain way in the world, to change other people, to change circumstances. It was asking God to change me. And it was asking God to find me where I was at in my story and to help me get through it in the best way that I could. And this prayer opened the door for me to begin to have this healthy relationship with God, this healthy spirituality in a way that I had never had before. I had spent all this time as a photographer who tells other people's stories. I spent all this time behind my camera watching other people's stories and telling them and observing them. And I realized that I had used that kind of as a way to hide out. My pain and my anxiety and my stress over the situation that I had been in when my dad died and all the stuff that came after that, it was deep and intense, and I was swimming in it. And I knew it was there, but instead of unpacking it and dealing with it in a way that was truly healthy, I felt overwhelmed by it and instead put my energy other places. But at this point where I hit rock bottom, I realized that I was not spiritually healthy. I was not physically healthy. I wasn't emotionally and mentally healthy. Because, and I heard y'all talked about this in Connections, all of those different kinds of health are linked. They all rely on each other. And when one's out of balance, the others are going to get out of balance. And so all of it was out of balance for me. So once I started putting energy into each of these different kinds of health, I started seeing how they would all inform the other kinds of health. And they would point things out to me and they'd inform things to me. And then I just became more and more healthy in all these different areas because I was working on the others. So my hope for you is that when you are going through a hard thing, that you're able to name and claim and unpack and own your story. Now, some of you may not have been through anything hard yet, and I really wish I could sit here and say, gosh, I hope you're one of the people that never has to go through anything hard. But that is just not how the world works. We're all going to go through hard stuff, different levels of what hard means. So it's my hope that when that thing happens that we can't control, that you're able to dig deep in your own story and find how you can be healthy through that. to find how you can be authentically yourself through that situation. Thank you so much for giving me the time and the space to share my story with you.